What happens when you combine a coconut and toasted marshmallows? Well, my friends, you get something that looks a bit like this. A toasted marshmallow coconut stout. I think we're ready to get into the pastry stouts this winter. Now the grain bill for this sweet stout is going to be somewhat complicated, so I'm not going to bother reading through all the stats and figures, particularly because I'm brewing by myself today. Odin, you need to pull your socks up. Everyone, drop a comment down below and tell them to stop working and start brewing. But onto the grains. We are going to be using a combination of ale malt for the large base of what we're going to be working with, rolled oats, dark chocolate malt, a little bit of Eclipse Midnight Wheat to really blacken up the color and just give us the look and feel that we're going for. Lactose, of course, and medium crystal malt. All the percentages are going to be showing up on the screen, but I would urge you to use 2 iotas of brain cells and just take a minute to think, unlike me, because I threw my rolled oats, or most of my rolled oats, into the grains before I milled them. You're not meant to do that, and we're gonna find out today if the rolled oats cause any issues inside the grain rollers. So it's an experiment for all of us here. The other thing that I would highly recommend using is rice hulls. Because we're using a decent amount of rolled oats, rice hulls act like little springs that push all the grains a little bit further apart and help the lautering. Basically help that water, that wort to drain through the grains a little more easily. It helps with efficiency and it helps you not get a stuck sparge. Now let's find out if this grain can actually get through this mill with the oats already in it. Houston, we have a problem. It's not the oats, it's just my shitty grain roller. Give me a second. I have found that sometimes literally shoving in a mash paddle down into the teeth helps to give the teeth a bit of bite and start pulling it through. We'll find out. Hey! I'm basically a mechanic. All right. So far, so good. So far, so good. If we get stuck, I'll let you know. Well, I am super surprised that that actually worked as well as it did. There was no issues with the crush whatsoever, but my goodness, those oats in there are pulverized. Here's what I have left. May as well throw it in after the fact now. I suspect we might get a slight efficiency boost because you're not normally meant to crush those rolled oats. We'll find out. Let's start getting this stuff into the mash tun. Now, before we actually begin the brew day itself, we need to make sure that we've adjusted our water chemistry. And in this case, we are going to be running with 102 parts per million of calcium, 7 parts magnesium, 28 sodium, 127 chloride, 66 sulfate, and 134 parts bicarbonate. Now the important parts here is the high amount of bicarbonate for that mouthfeel for what a stout really should be, as well as the 2-to-1 ratio of chloride to sulfate, because we want to push this into the more malty territory rather than the dry or bitter side of things, particularly with it being a sweet stout. We want a lot of malt character coming through. So I'm gonna go ahead and add that into the mash before we actually get going with our grains, and whilst our water is heating up. I'm also going to add a similar ratio, well, same ratio, but similar volumes or amounts to the sparge water before we get to that step. As always, throw in a little bit of grain at a time, give it a mix, throw in a little bit more. If you're new to brewing, that is purely to help prevent dough balls, which is basically when you get a clump of grain that gets wet on the outside, it stays dry on the inside, you know, with this little clumpy ball thing. And that's not good for anyone, it's not fun. It just means that you're losing efficiency and you're not getting as much beer as you should out of your grains. So also you like to use the paint mixer style mash paddle because it makes life a hell of a lot easier. I don't need to sit there mashing with the old school paddle, and as nice as it is to use those paddles sometimes when you're feeling nostalgic, this just makes your life easier, faster, and better. Link up there for 10 things all homebrewers should own if you want to check out some other cool gadgets that I use on my daily when I'm making my beers. Now, inside here, give it a quick blitz, and then we will throw in some rice hulls as well. I don't actually think we're gonna have too many issues with the stuck sparge, but just in the interest of not making my life hell later, let's throw the rice hulls in anyway, just to make sure that we don't have any problems. If you've never used rice hulls before, by the way, you should aim for around 5% of the total grain bill's weight being your rice hulls, as a kind of a rough guide for how much you should use. We are also running with 20 liters of strike water today. We're gonna mash at 68 degrees Celsius for 1 hour. So we're gonna try and retain a lot of our body and our mouthfeel by mashing at the higher end of things. It means that our final gravity is gonna finish a little higher than usual, but I also want that because this is a sweet stout and I want this to feel like a dessert in a glass. I don't want this to be mega boozy, and I don't want it to finish up dry. I want it to retain a lot of that body and that mouthfeel. And I think by using the oats, it's gonna really help to give us that creamy effect, kind of like an oatmeal stout. That roasted, dark chocolate, unlike traditional roasted malt, doesn't carry quite as much astringency, so it's got a little more dark chocolate vibes to it, a little kind of biscuitiness to it, definitely a lot of maltiness to it, but not quite so much bitterness or perceived bitterness or astringency as a traditional roasted barley, for example. And then that ale malt's just gonna give us the large body of what we're working with. It's a slightly biscuity malt, it's got a little bit of something to it, but it's really all those specialties coming together that's gonna really round out this beer and make it something really special. So as well as the lactose being able to give us a boost in our sweetness and our creaminess, we're also using a decent amount of medium crystal malt, which is gonna give us that toffee caramel kind of chewy factor. So all of this together, I think, is gonna make a really fantastic body for just an excellent stout. So let's blitz what's left of here so we can get on to the next step. You know what? It's at this moment I have just realized I do not have my grain tube in. It's sitting right there. Oh man, my malt pipe is here. Okay, this is fine. I'm just gonna tip everything out into a bucket, transfer around, and do a bit of a tidy up here. Give me a minute. Crisis averted. Crisis averted. I'm very happy that I'm doing this brew day on the smaller Brewzilla and not the big boy, because that would have been a lot harder to lift and dump. Anyway, I've emptied the whole thing out into this bucket here. I've then given it a big quick, whoops. No, I'm losing word. I then gave it a quick rinse out with a hose, just to make sure we don't have any grain hanging around in the suction area for the pump. I can't think and talk today, guys. Clearly, my place is all over the head. Oh, but I'm very happy though that I picked up on that mistake before we got to the end of mashing and I had to dump out the whole grain bed and unsettle the whole thing. That would have been significantly worse. So, wow. I've had some scuffed brew days, but that would have been painful to say the least. Now I'm just gonna rinse out the grain that's in this bucket because I don't wanna lose any of my efficiency and it's gonna throw off my calculations if I don't recapture all the grain that I planned on having in this mash. That should do it. Okay. We're back to where we started. We're good. We are good. All right, let's keep this recirculating, finish dumping in what's left of our grains. And hopefully that's the last really bimbo mistake that I make for today. Oh Lord, this is what happens when Odin doesn't show up for brew days. Things go wrong. Things go wrong. He must be my good luck charm. I'm gonna throw in the last of my rice hulls as well, just to double down and make sure that I don't have any more issues when it comes to the grain side of things today. All right, top screen now goes on. That is the mashing inside of things done. Not using my gloves because I'm an absolute fool. If you do want to get heat-proof gloves, I'll pop a link down below where you can get them from Kegland. We also have an affiliate program now, so we get a small little kickback that helps support the channel, and it's cool equipment that you guys are probably going to get anyway, so use that link down below if you want to get anything from Kegland. I'm now going to start recirculating this for 1 hour, and we'll see you at the end of that hour to start with our sparging. Mashing is now done. We have hit our mash out temperature, so it's time to start sparging. If you're new to brewing, sparging basically means you're going to run hot water over through your grain bed to extract any sugars that are still trapped within those grains. Because whilst we have liquid draining out of here right now, once that's all drained out, we're still gonna have sugar saturated in the grains that we wanna pull out so that we can basically get greater efficiency and get more beer than what we paid for. Make sense? I think that makes sense. Now, we're gonna be running with 15 liters of sparge water sitting at 80 degrees Celsius, and I've already put the salts and phosphoric acid and everything in here as well. What I might quickly do first, actually, is get a quick sample of what this looks like now, and then get another sample after the sparge, and we can just compare the difference. All right, there we are. We have our pre-sparging sample locked and loaded. I'm now gonna start running the sparge water over the top of the grain bed. Got to put that little stopper in so we don't just lose all the water down that center malt pipe, that overflow tube, I should say. Alrighty, now something else I also like to do, which I've said a few times before, I like to flip the lid of the boiler itself, because I feel like running the sparge water over the lid then through that center hole just makes it a little bit more gentle on the grain bed so you disturb it less. It's probably me just convincing myself, to be honest, but anything you can do to disturb the grain bed less is ideal so that you don't end up channeling, which is when you have a basically water finding the path of least resistance and flowing straight through to the bottom without getting evenly distributed through the grains, so you're not actually maximizing your fly sparge. The other reason that it's quite important is so that you end up with just good clarity. If you disturb the grain bed, you're gonna get a bunch of muck basically floating around, hazing up the beer, which if you're making a NEPA, doesn't really matter, but for this stout, I do want it to be black, but I also want it to be crystal clear. Stouts, I think, are one of those beers that very much benefit from clarity. When it gets murky, it looks a little bit like mud. So I want a nice crystal clear, pitch black beer. All right, we are now well and truly at boiling, which means it is time for me to add our bittering hops. In this case, we are going to be using 14 grams of Northern Brewer / half an ounce. That's gonna give us 11.2 IBUs. And so in they go, start your clocks. That is a 1 hour edition. I didn't quite get all of that out. There we go. That is a 1 hour edition. Start your clocks and away we go. There's only going to be one other hop addition because really the hops are not the star of the show in a stout. It's particularly a sweet stout. It's just there to make the beer taste like beer. So we'll come back with 10 minutes left to spare where we'll add our final hop addition, and off camera at the 15-minute mark we'll add a little bit of whirl flock. It's all in the recipe down below. We'll see you towards the end of the hour. And here we have our side by side. This is pre-sparge, this is post-sparge. Honestly, with stouts, it's so hard to tell. They're both black. This one's slightly lighter. Oh, and they both taste good. Stouts always taste the best of any beer before it's been fermented. There's just all that roast character, that sweetness. It's basically like drinking a long black coffee, but sweet with a ton of sugar. Anyway, back to next steps. Now, it can hardly be called a toasted marshmallow coconut stout without the marshmallows or the coconuts, right? So here's what I recommend doing. With the coconut shavings, toast them in the oven at 180 degrees Celsius for 5 to 7 minutes, depending on how bronzed or how caramelized you want them to get. I've done mine for 7. For the marshmallows, do a similar thing. I'm gonna say 220 degrees Celsius for about 5 to 8 minutes in the oven, depending on how, I guess, bronzed you want them to be. And then you can also finish them off with a butane torch like I'm going to do so. But I'm gonna go ahead and just run the flames over the top of all the marshmallows just to get some extra caramelization and bronzing on top, because I want it to taste like the toasted marshmallow, not just the gooey fresh marshmallow straight out of the packet. Right, now the game plan was to just throw all the marshmallows in and let them melt. But I'm starting to think that might be a bad idea because we might end up with a bit of scorching going on. So I'm gonna put in the grain tube, the grain basket, whatever you wanna call it, into the boiler. And then I'm gonna slowly dissolve all this stuff into it, as well as add our lactose, because we do still need to add our 400 grams, almost a pound of lactose powder. So let's get started with the marshmallows. Okay, I have just had a small brainwave, and I'm thinking it might actually be easier to dissolve the marshmallows into some really hot boiling wort first, and then add that to the boiler. So hopefully this whole big sticky mess doesn't get stuck to the bottom plate and just massively scorch. We will find out. Let's add some hot work to this. Okay, I think it's working. I think the boiling wort is hot enough that the marshmallows don't stand too much of a chance. And hopefully they all just kind of dissolve. I hope so. Otherwise we just got a big mess for no reason. And whilst we're here trying to dissolve gooey marshmallow, I may as well throw my lactose powder into the boiler because this stuff shouldn't really have too much of an issue dissolving, so I can just pop that in now and not have to worry about it. Back to marshmallows in a second because we do need to add our 10-minute addition, which is going to be 28 grams / 1 ounce each of Fuggles and Northern Brewer, and that's going to give us 12.5 IBUs. And in goes the last of the marshmallow milkshake slurry puree thing. Well, we got there. And now, of course, the last thing we can't forget is the coconut shavings. There's 5 minutes left in the boil. In they go. And hopefully we don't end up with a very, very stuck pump with all the garbage that we put into this thing. I don't even know if you can call this beer anymore. It's just an abomination of stuff. I'm now gonna get the cooling system set up so that we can bring this down to yeast pitching temperature in 5 minutes time. And we are now cooling. Now we did have a very brief moment of panic where the pump was absolutely stuck, and I suspect there's a big blob of marshmallow in there. So if you're gonna do this, be careful, really dissolve those marshmallows before you go throwing them in, but it's all fine now. We probably boiled for like another 2 or 3 minutes longer than I wanted, so the IBUs would be theoretically a little bit higher. But I'm not too concerned about that. I think there's gonna be enough residual sugar and just enough sweetness in this thing, period, that it's not gonna matter too much, those extra IBUs. I'm now gonna cool this thing down to yeast pitching temperature, and then we can talk about yeast. It's now coming out at 28 degrees Celsius, which is good enough to be yeast pitching temperature for what I want to do today. So I'm gonna go ahead and start the transfer. I got too much stuff up here. Who else knows the struggle of like trying to delicately balance copious amounts of glass items and metal and just hoping you don't have a collapsing tower of brew like Pisa. Anyway, I'm rambling, but there we go. We can transfer. Hey! Nice. Okay, now we can talk about the yeast selection. I want a fairly clean fermenting yeast for this one. I don't want it to be particularly estery. I think there is going to be more than enough flavors going on, what with all the marshmallows, the toasted coconut, and the massive amounts of roasted malt and all that kind of stuff. So I don't want to muddy the waters any more than what it will already be. So I want a clean fermenter. I want something that's not going to ferment out super dry, that's not capable of really robust fermenting and taking on a bunch of more difficult sugars. I want that final gravity to be kind of medium to higher side. So I also want a yeast that is widely accessible for all you guys that might want to do this recipe. So that leaves me with 2 choices in my mind, either SO4 or USO5. In this case, I think USO5 is going to suit it better. It's cleaner than SO4. And I think it's going to just kind of let the rest of the flavors do their thing, if that makes sense. I don't need any possible esters going on in this one. I want it to be clean. I'm probably also going to ferment this under a bit of pressure as well. Probably around like 5 to 10 PSI of pressure to just really help that yeast make things nice and tidy. So once this is finished transferring, we can pitch. There we have it. Transfer is well and truly finished. So we got our 2 packets of USO5 that we can go ahead and dump in now. And in they go. I'm also gonna whack the wrapped peel into here. May as well track the fermentation and see how this thing progresses, because we have a few key indicators that we want to look for when we add our next special ingredient. So we're done with the brew day, but we're not done with making this beer yet. So once this thing is nearing final gravity, we can add our final adjunct and really boost this toasted marshmallow, toasted coconut sweet stout. I need a shorter name. Comments down below if you've got a fun, quirky name, maybe something punny. Anyway, we'll see you probably in about a week or so. It's now about 6 days later, and it's time for our final secret ingredient. It's not that secret, to be honest. It's just more coconut. There's plenty of marshmallow flavor in there now, but what we need is to boost that coconut flavor just a little bit. So we're going to go another half a kilo / 1.1 pounds of toasted coconut. Again, that was 180 degrees Celsius in the oven for 8 minutes to get that nice caramelization, light browning, kind of touch of goldenness on all those flakes, and that really helps to bring out the flavors, the oils from the coconut and everything like that. And I think this is gonna really make this stout super silky and super creamy, along with all the other things going on in there. I just hope that the Gladiator malt in there does enough to make sure we have head retention with all the extra oil we're gonna be throwing in. But let's get this into a brew in a bag and chuck it in the fermenter. Now, I was just prepping to empty the fermenter of CO2 because I was fermenting under pressure. It was under 10 PSI, as I mentioned earlier. But as I was emptying out the gas, that's how high the krausen is getting. This thing is still very much alive and kicking. This is gonna be a matter of patience for a bit. I'm gonna have to slowly bleed this fermenter until I can actually throw the coconut in, because if I try to open it right now, we're gonna have one hell of a mess to clean up. So opening and releasing for like the next 20 minutes, I assume. Right, it's now settled down enough that we're gonna throw this in. I also do have a little magnet in there to kind of treat this like a dry hop, I suppose, so that hopefully once this thing is finished fully and it's sat on the coconut for long enough, if it's kind of getting in the way of my my beer post outlet tube thing, the floating dip tube, there we go, that's the word I was looking for. Hopefully I can try and like drag it out of the way with the magnet from the outside, but we'll see, because I normally do these kind of heavy adjunct in the dry hop stage beers in like the big bucket fermenters for this reason, so that it all just settles out eventually and I can draw out the spigot without a problem. But anyway, I forgot that I was going to be doing that with this one. Let's release all that gas now and open her up. And then we're going to be nice and quick about it, throwing these coconut shavings in, because if they operate anything like dry hops, we're going to have a hell of a lot of foaming coming straight out the top here once I throw the coconut in. Let's go, squash, squash, squash. Get in there. Well, this was a lot more elegant in my head than the reality of the situation is now. All right, kind of in there, kind of. Why is it so hard to get this in? There we go. I can kind of drag that now, and that has to go fully in because I'm a fool and I didn't think that through. Now we can close her up. That smells really good. Wow, you can, that marshmallow is coming out strong. This is gonna be interesting to see if the marshmallow and the coconut balance each other or fight each other in the glass at the end of it. Now I'm gonna drag it down by the magnet into the beer. Oh, look at that bubbling. Okay, I'm quite happy now that I gave that time to rest. I think that might have been a bit of an explosion. I am also gonna flush this out with a bit of CO2 now to try and protect the beer from all the oxygen that I just let in there. But that is job done. I'm gonna throw the regulator back on after this, let it crank itself up to like 15 PSI if it has the sugars left to do so. And then I'll move on to getting it in the keg, cold crashing, conditioning, etc. So the next time you guys see me will be in about a week from now, where we have a fresh pint, of coconut and toasted marshmallow stout. And here she is. It is a very ridiculously, voluptuously creamy pastry stout. This thing, the head just stays forever. It never vanishes. This thing lingers. It's slightly browner than I'd like right now, but I attribute that also to the fact that this thing is extremely turbid. It is not cleared out yet. It's still very, very hazy. That's largely because A, it was only kegged a week ago, but the more important thing is B, all those coconut shavings were releasing extra oils. And that oil probably kicked up some of the yeast cake at the bottom when I was racking it off into the keg, because it's a floating dip tube, so it probably sucked up a little bit of yeast more than I'd normally like. But all of that will clear out with time in the keg. So I just need to let that thing settle. But let's go in for the flavor, shall we? I can feel the moustache. Wow. That's cream. She likes the cream. That is cream. That is ridiculously creamy in an excellent way, not in a bad way. So up front, tastes like stout. It's kind of like on the dry-ish like Irish stout kind of vibes at the very beginning. It's got that little bit of roast, that little bit of coffee, kind of a dark chocolate espresso character going on that very quickly transitions into the marshmallows. The marshmallows carry the main body of the flavor through the middle of like the palate. And then at the very end, like 4 seconds later, you get that lingering toasted coconut thing going on. It's like a crescendo of different flavors. It's like, okay, now I can taste that. Now I can taste that. Now I can taste that. That's very, very interesting. It's a very dynamic, very three-dimensional beer. Very, very cool. I would call that a success. I'd call it an absolute success. I would recommend using a fermenter without a dip tube or something so that you don't end up sucking up a bit of yeast, don't end up sucking up a bit of the sediment inside that fermenter. I think the bag of the coconut shavings was sitting on the dip tube and it weighed it down a bit, so I sucked up more than I actually wanted to. But the flavors of the beer are all there. And as I said, this thing's gonna clear up in time. So I would love to hear what kinds of specialty pastry stouts you guys have made before. There was a lot of recommendations or thoughts on what we might be making a few weeks ago, back when we hit 5,000 subscribers. Link to that up there if you wanna help celebrate with us. But I'd love to hear what kind of specialty stouts you might want us to make for the winter season here in Australia. But thank you so much, guys, for watching this video. As always, we appreciate the support and the dedication that you all have to this channel. So cheers, and we'll catch you next week.